Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could we have the roll call?
Yes, Lorraine Koss.
Here.
Charles has asked to be excused. He had a work function. John Byron.
Yo.
Vinnie Taranto.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
Terry Casto.
Here.
Karen McLaughlin.
Here.
Stephanie Ely.
Here.
John Durkee.
Here.
Courtney Barker.
Here.
Todd Swingle.
Here.
Danielle Bowden.
Here.
David Lane has asked to be excused. He's on travel. And Gene Artusa sent an email and said he can no longer serve due to health issues.
Vinnie?
We have a quorum.
Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
Touch my screen.
Yes, wait. Virginia, did you have a change?
Yes, Dr. Drew Palmer is not with us this morning. When he came and presented before, we had arranged him to come back in November, and so however many months ago that was, there was a typo in my email, and I gave him the wrong, I gave him yesterday's date. So
Oh, no.
he was available yesterday, he's not available today, I'm trying to get him scheduled for December. So my apologies.
All right.
I move to approve the agenda as modified.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'll also entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Virginia, if you would give us the monthly progress and fiscal reports.
Good morning. So the septic ordinance overlay maps are now posted on a website that is available to municipal staff as well as county staff and outside contractors and the public to be able to see which parcels are within that overlay where 65% nutrient reduction, nitrogen reduction is required. We are we're proceeding with a land purchase for a regional stormwater project in the Kings Mill, Aurora area. The Grand Canal, we're very close to advertising. We're working on getting setback waivers for property owners along the project who want us to remove muck closer to their docks and seawalls than we would otherwise be able to get without waivers. The expansion of the O'Galley project out into the river, that's going well. Last month we told you that the state permit was being issued. The federal permit has been sent for formal consultation, but we hope that'll be fairly quick since the state agencies have already approved it. The Indian Harbor Beach muck project, those environmental resource reports are complete, so we'll be moving into permitting. The Miko sewer line, we have our first quarterly groundwater monitoring report, so we're getting a good idea of what's the contamination level in the soils in that area before that project goes to construction. UCF Living Shoreline Monitoring, we have their first quarterly report, which we shared some encouraging news last month. We've got a lot of settlement out there on reef, so that's very encouraging. And we have open purchase orders, and now that we're in our new fiscal year, of open purchase orders for all of the contracts that are currently let. Under Work This Way, as you know, last month was the deadline for new proposals, and we received 23 requests for new projects. 15 of those were stormwater. We have one additional wastewater treatment plant upgrade for reuse water. We have one community that wanted to take advantage of the new pilot program for smoke testing, one muck removal project, and 5 living shoreline projects. And Brandon has been going through those projects, filling out the summary sheet that you as a committee had asked for the first go-around, and so we should have those to you next week so that you'll have at least 2 weeks to review them, hopefully closer to 3 weeks to review them before your December meeting, which got moved up because of holidays.
Virginia,
Yes.
who is the wastewater treatment? Do you remember?
No.
Okay.
Or the muck removal, do you remember?
We need Brandon.
All right.
Wastewater treatment plant? Who was the wastewater treatment plant proposal from?
That one is, blanking on who it is right now.
Or the...
Yeah, it was Cocoa Beach. Yeah.
Thank you. And
Yes.
is the muck project also Cocoa Beach?
Yes, the MUC project is the 3rd phase of the Cocoa Beach project.
Sorry.
Okay, the Titusville Osprey plant upgrade, that design contract has been awarded and a notice to proceed issued, so that's moving forward. Palm Bay, you'll notice in the financials that they've been submitting some significant invoices, so that design is well underway now. The Melbourne Penwood Septic to Sewer project, the contractor approval is going to the City Council, so that's about to get under construction. The South Beaches leaky sewer lateral smoke testing, you've got just the executive summary of the Phase 2 smoke testing report. If you want the full report, it's not ADA compliant, so we couldn't include it in your packet, but we're happy to email it to you or anybody else who wants it. It's, very, very telling, and it's encouraging to me that the largest I&I reduction comes from the replacement of those clean-out caps and from repair of the leaky laterals. And so when we look at the estimated cost of dealing with clean-out caps and leaky laterals from the Phase 1 and Phase 2 areas, it's right around $800,000, and our budget was $840,000, so we're in good shape for implementing that pilot project. We've been developing a monitoring plan with the Department of Health to test innovative septic, passive septic drain field technology here. We're on the 3rd round of edits to the conditions for that memorandum of agreement, and so we're looking forward to getting that work underway. We've been working with a vendor who's extremely interested in getting started as soon as possible, working with us. So we'll have more tools in the toolbox. Titusville South Street project, the bid has been awarded with construction to begin probably in January. The MIMS muck dredging and outflow treatment, that dredging continues and should be complete by December 1st. The emptying of the DMMA will continue next year for quite some time, but the dredging should be complete in just a few weeks. The perfluorinated compound sampling of the lagoon, the last of the lab results is due back next week on November 27th, so we should have that information available soon. Dylan Hansen has been continuing to film the My Lagoon story videos, which we have 3 to share with you today. They're looking really good. And then these are some items that aren't on the list. We had, for the first time, when I ask staff for, what are their accomplishments, I always have to cut a few because they don't fit on a page. This time I really had to cut, so I'm going to tell you some more things. And we're not allowed, because of ADA, we can't make the font any smaller. We're not allowed to use acronyms, so we're just stuck. The TDC has their new Lagoon program. We filed 3 applications for the Lagoon that are projects that we believe are good for the Lagoon, but they don't have a nutrient reduction benefit that works well in the structure of the Save Our Indian River Lagoon plan. So one of those is a feasibility study to do an artificial fishing, breakwater, and shoreline restoration along the Max Brewer Causeway, where there's a fantastic recreational beach as well as nesting for horseshoe crabs that we're trying to restore. Another proposal Matt Culver put together for derelict vessel removals. Anybody who is out there in the lagoon knows that derelict vessels are just stacking up more and more all the time. And then a third project to install 3 webcams, one at a reduce project, one at a remove project, one at a restore project, and every time that project is completed, we would move the webcam to the next project of that same type, and have that feed available for us as staff to be able to monitor the progress of construction, but for the public to be able to see those projects actually happening, and for tourists to be able to see how much this community is engaged in repairing the lagoon. So we're excited about those proposals. We'll see how the TDC committee, the beach committee, does their ranking, so we'll see how that falls out. We've also, the outreach that is funded in the Lagoon plan, we've advertised for marketing, community-based social marketing firms. We've had the presentations, the firms have been ranked. Yesterday, the negotiating committee was meeting, so we have, I think, one more step in the selection negotiation process before we have folks on board.
If I could, a question on that. I understand that one of the down-selecting firms is not a PR firm. It is a conservation nonprofit that intends to sub to a PR firm. And the question I would have, oversight responsibility, the question I would have is what value does this extra layer of management and overhead add to it? The intention and the discussion in this body has been, let's bring in the pros from Dover who know how to do this. And what value is added by an extra layer, and B, are we taking on some of the cost for mission support of this other organization, this nonprofit organization? Just tuck that in the back of your mind as you deal with it. I think we've got money in the future for this area. The intention was to bring in people who do this for a living, not people who won't say, we'll figure out how to do it and hire somebody to do it for us. And probably too late on this particular round, but in the future I would hope that we deal with genuine marketing and public relation firms rather than people who can hire genuine marketing and public relations firms, because we can do that too.
So thank you for those points. So one of the things that we did with this RFP was we combined the Lagoon outreach funded by the half-cent sales tax with the stormwater consortium outreach that we have 9 cities in the county participating in stormwater outreach. And so there are different service levels that were all advertised together. That stormwater outreach requires a lot of boots on the ground, going into the classrooms, working with first graders and third graders and all different age groups, working events, going to civic organizations. And so what we found is that the marketing firms don't have those kind of boots on the ground people that do that side of things. And so there's a role for both, I believe, and we'll see what comes out of the the process.
Going forward, you heard my comments.
Yes. The 2019 plan update is well underway. We've got a meeting, staff has a meeting with Marcy Frick next week to go over a lot of the edits that have been made so far and try to pull together the last edits. And there's a lot of changes going on, so just to remind you, we are looking at adding in the wastewater treatment plant section, in addition to upgrading reclaimed water, the water that isn't used as reclaimed water because there's insufficient demand. A lot of that is going to ribs and spray fields and being soaked into the ground at that same nutrient concentration. And so there are ways to put liners, nutrient removal media in those ribs and spray fields. And so we've been working on the economics of that. It looks very favorable for a number of facilities. So we'll be bringing that to you. We're working on package treatment plants. We have some, older, from the 1950s, 1960s package plants that are right on the shoreline of the lagoon. We're looking at either being able to hook them up to sewer or upgrade them in place. We are going to hear a presentation from Dr. Zarillo about enhanced circulation. We're looking to incorporate that into the plan. I don't know about funding, because those are extremely expensive projects and require partnerships with, in this case, Florida Department of Transportation, and very long timelines, but we certainly want to include that information in the plan so that we're not silent on it.
Are we talking about cutting a new inlet? Is that what that is?
No. You'll,
Pipes? Pumps?
causeways that are blocking natural
So,
circulation
bigger
within the
relief bridges.
lagoon. Yes. And then the original plan analysis, when it looked at septic, we looked at single-family residential neighborhoods, hooking them up to sewer, and we looked at individual homes that could be upgraded. We've had the consultant, Applied Ecology, that worked with us on the septic ordinance, looking at multifamily as well. So we have some very dense septic in some condo, townhome, multifamily, quadruplexes. And so we're mapping those, we're estimating those loads, estimating the cost to hook up, because in those cases you can get a lot of nutrient removal with very little piping. And so we believe we're going to find some really cost-effective options there. So there are a number of other changes in the plan, but those are some of the big ones to expect. And then the other thing that's going on is we gave you forms to fill out if you wanted to be reappointed. You remember, half of you were appointed by the League of Cities and half of you were appointed by the County Commission. So on Monday, we took the League of Cities appointments back to the League to ask if they wanted to reappoint all of the League appointments who wanted to be reappointed, and they said yes. So we'll be taking that to the County Commission on December 4th to get those positions approved, as well as asking them to reappoint the board-appointed folks who want to stay a second term. And we've also asked for permission to advertise for filling the vacancies. As Carol just said, Jean Artusa is going to be leaving us, and Karen McLaughlin also has informed us she will be leaving. I think there are a couple of you that we still haven't heard from, so if we don't hear from you soon, we got to move on this. So please let us know.
Virginia?
Yes.
Okay, so broken record here, but I'm going back to the lateral lines and the smoke testing, a great second report. In this second study, there were 7,592 properties that were tested. I actually think there's a lot of great news here. only 21 lateral lines exhibited breaks and leaks, presumably contributing nutrients to groundwater. Previously, there were over 5,100 properties studied, and there were 9 lateral lines broken. So the utilities have now paid for and studied over 12,000 properties, and we've only found 30 lateral line breaks. So that's great to hear that we actually started this because we were concerned that those lateral line breaks could be a significant contributor. And if anything, this study has demonstrated, well, we've crossed one off the list. They're clearly not a problem of significance. So citizens should understand that 99.9999% of the homes that are hooked up to wastewater systems in this county, at least at their yards, are not contributing to the problem. But and I'm sure there's some money somewhere else spent, but I just took the 30 lateral lines that we've identified as a problem, divided by the $800,000, and it comes out to over $26,000 per property to fix a lateral line. And that strikes me. We can replace an entire septic system with the new system, with the new systems at a lower cost than that. So the numbers aren't quite adding up. I do understand probably the best value of these studies has been identification of I&I problems. Those do impact the lagoon, and I'm glad the wastewater people are spending the money to do that. But the lateral lines, we've demonstrated at this point that they're not the concern we thought they might be.
Oh, yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't someone come before us and tell us that the smoke testing was not the most effective manner to test the lateral lines because of the level of groundwater?
It depends on the conditions of the groundwater and the conditions of the ground cover, and there are multiple factors.
So the smoke testing might not be the most accurate form of testing to display how many lateral lines are actually broken.
I don't know that I would say it's not the best way, but it is not a perfect way. There are CCTV cameras that are also used, but those are not always useful in these Orangeburg pipes that are in sorry shape already. You don't want to damage the pipes by trying to run these cameras through them. And so I don't want to give anybody the impression that smoke testing is not a good way to test, but it is not fail-safe.
Okay.
Okay. Madam Chair, maybe I missed it, the average age of these homes and the
50s
pipes?
through 70s.
50s through 70s, and the pipe material used was?
Original, they were clay and copper.
Okay, and most of those haven't been replaced, so these are the originals?
I don't, that I can't tell you. I mean, I think most of, even, for example, like my house, I've already had mine replaced, but I'm getting ready to replace it again. Not through this program, but on my own, all on my own. But that's because, it's on the beach when we have about harsh conditions over there. So
Okay.
things tend to go away after a while, a little faster on the beach than other places.
And if I recall correctly, on a very small section of the beach, Indian Harbor Beach and Satellite Beach, there were, 70 knockouts, inspection?
No, 90, John. In the first study of 5,100 houses, there were over 90 of those that were discovered.
That's a bit scary, not because it leaks sewage into the yard, but rather because it allows stormwater and big rain events to absolutely overload the system. And I think a metric that's as useful as how many things are broken is how many gallons does it overload the wastewater treatment system with, which then ends up in the river.
And I want to ask Todd to speak on this because he's the expert, but the manhole covers appear to be an even larger problem in volume of water. So again, the study is finding some important areas that we can make improvements, but lateral lines don't appear to be a significant problem at this point. Todd, I yield to you because you're an expert in this stuff.
My turn. Yeah, so just a couple things on this. Regarding smoke testing, it is a very common, it is a very quick and cost-effective tool to assess laterals, in particular those that are above the groundwater table. So you can run into issues where the portion of the lateral is below the groundwater table that the smoke may not come out. And so that can be a concern. But where the lateral is above the groundwater table, it's a very cost-effective method, and it does a great job, and it's one of the tools that utilities should use. I guess the challenge that I have some concerns on are, this is pretty standard stuff. This is what every utility that's operating effectively should be doing on a routine basis. The question that I have for us as a committee is going back to the very original discussion of where do we draw the lines of what this committee and our obligations are, and what are we trying to achieve, and what is the utility's obligations. Because much of what was found here, I see no data that says on an ongoing basis what the nutrient discharge from these deficiencies is contributing to the lagoon challenge. Do these present a problem in terms of these intense rainfall events? Absolutely. Is that what we are trying to fix? I don't know. But that, to me, is the big part of the discussion, and whether that is the best use of dollars. I do concur with some of these numbers are a little disconcerting to me. A $326,000 for 163 cleanouts. This is a $5 piece of plastic that screws into the top, so I don't know where we're coming up for $2,000 on those. So maybe that's the total cost and investigations and everything rolled in, and could be so, or installation of cleanouts.
That's for the ones where they can't just screw a new cap in because the vertical piece is also fractured, broken, missing.
Okay. So to me, that's really the bigger discussion, is understanding what the data contribution of these is from a nitrogen load, and is this a good expenditure, and where do we draw the lines of our lagoon efforts versus the utility obligations to operate effectively. And I think, from my standpoint, I don't know that this yet answers that, and it may really be more of just a policy decision and choice.
Courtney?
So, from what I understand, we went through all this at the last meeting, but since we're doing it again, I'll just say it again. When we are looking at the smoke testing in general, we did that because we were looking at the private side of the system, and the utility has no obligation to the private side of the system. And it's very similar to if we don't feel like we should be interfering in the private side of the system, then we should also be thinking the same way about septic tanks too, because that's a private side of a system. So the idea here was, we had a huge outrage with the discharges on the beaches, particularly. We had a lot of people asking our committee to do something about that, and that's what we're doing here. So it is a small investment, and actually we really don't know what the total investment is, because I agree that there are some instances, like there was no smoke coming out of my house, but I have to replace my line, and I know I do. I mean, and I probably wouldn't have even thought about it if we hadn't gone through this process. It probably wouldn't have crossed my mind. And so that's another issue that we're doing, is the whole idea of the smoke testing, I can't tell you how many calls we got from people saying, I had no idea what a cleanout cap was. We put an article in the Beachcaster to explain to people what it was. We had people coming by saying, I can't find it. Can somebody come over to my house and show me where it is? So there's an education process there that's happening that was not happening ever without this process. So sure, we can say, it's not what we do, but I think right now it's private side of the system, it's educating people, and whether or not the utilities do it or not, they should be upgrading their plants too, but we're talking about plant upgrades now, so, where do we draw the line? But I think that's what the purpose of this fund is for, is to do upgrades across the county and to get the private systems in order, whether it's septic or sewer.
I think to kind of, we were talking about, or somebody mentioned how this affects the nitrogen load. And as Courtney was saying, this, I believe, was a result of there was too much capacity in the system after the rainfall. And when Mark Regan came and did the presentation about that, the one area that they said that they didn't talk about was the laterals. And that's when this came about. So I don't know if there's a direct nutrient load number related to this. This was more or less related to the overwhelming the system. And I don't know how those numbers equal out. But I know that this was our attempt back then to look at a section that the company, the public sector wasn't addressing as far as helping the system handle what was going through. But I think there are lots of good questions as far as the cost effectiveness and whatnot, but that was just, I think, the origin of where this came about.
Todd?
Just real quick, I am completely supportive of us addressing these private side issues. And the question for me becomes, though, is exactly what our objectives are. And if we're clear on our objectives and we say that this ties into education and awareness and there's significant value from that, I fully support that. If it is that we are extending our mission and that we feel like working toward managing sewer capacity, even if the nitrogen reduction isn't there, then that's a policy decision we as a board have the discussion on. Let's bear in mind, everything we're discussing right now is talking about water getting into the sewer system. When we first had these discussions, one of the questions that came up about the laterals was on a day-to-day basis, how much, if these laterals are cracked and leaking, how much is getting out of the laterals on a day-to-day basis that was a potential more significant ongoing contribution. I don't think we've answered that from a data standpoint. Again, if there is side benefits, we've got a lot of different areas that we're working on that we say that by engaging the public and building awareness that there's value in it. From that, I think this is a great investment. I just want us to be really clear on what we're achieving, because if we put this into the context of the rest of our metrics, which is based upon dollar value nitrogen reduction, I don't know that I believe it's there, and I haven't seen the data that would suggest that it's there and it's competitive. I would like to at least have eyes wide open to say, this may not be a great nitrogen investment, but we think there's so many other side benefits to it that we as a committee still recommend it moving forward to the county, and we understand where we're drawing our boundaries.
Yeah, and acknowledging that this body is neither advocacy nor policy, there is available in this general area a pair of things that could do a lot going forward, and that is to require at time of sale of a property an inspection of laterals as it's hooked up to a sewer line, and inspection and repair, and inspection and repair of septic tanks at time of sale also. We do this for all sorts of other things. Hi, I want to refinance, I'm on the water, I need an elevation survey, that's $500. I need an inspection in order for the new buyer to buy, etc. I think this is a policy area that the municipalities and the county itself ought to take a really hard look at. Yes?
I've heard the other side, and I just want to make mention of it. If there's a neighborhood and there's 30 houses, and let's say 5 of the houses change hands pretty often, there's 25 houses that are not being addressed. And so I've heard the perspective that it's a penalty to those that are selling their house, whereas the rest of the people that are not selling may be sitting on bad lines and faulty systems, and they're not forced to have inspections. Just saying that because I've heard it a lot.
There are all sorts of other penalties that fall to them as well. The place has to be habitable, it can't be full of termites and a whole bunch of other things. In addition, the cure for the 25 is to require periodic inspections, perhaps every 10 years. And that means that everybody's on the hook to stop polluting the river with bad septic and bad laterals. It's a policy issue, it ain't our circuit, but I think it's worthy of continued mention.
Madam Chair, I concur, and Courtney, I have heard the same discussions. That this was a very positive project that was conducted, from a public relations standpoint, people started to ask questions about their own laterals. To go back to the beginning, it was our hypothesis, and what stimulated this whole study was that leaks in lateral lines, particularly in highly corrosive areas like the beach, could be contributing nutrients. And I think what we've discovered is, for the most part, for the vast majority, that it's not a contributor, and as Todd has pointed out, we have not documented how much of a contribution. What we have found is that the I&I, from the little $5, $10 caps to the manholes, we've definitely found things that do contribute through the wastewater system into pollution of the lagoon. But they're probably not laterals. But people are now aware of this, and so all of that's positive. I'm just concerned, and I think Todd said it exactly correctly, and I don't have a problem, by the way, it's just like a septic. If there's a lateral line broken, I think it's within what we're allowed to do to help use public funds to fix that, to stop a contribution of nutrients, just like we're going to get rid of septic tanks. I'm not opposed to any of that. I'm just really excited to hear that we were wrong, and that the lateral lines themselves, when you only have 30 out of almost 13,000 tests, is just not going to be that big of a problem. Let's focus on some other stuff.
Do we know where the groundwater level is? Just asking.
It varies during the
It
year.
varies.
Yeah.
Varies regionally and seasonally.
Or when the test was done, or do we have any
So
of that data?
they purposefully tested during the dry season when the
Okay.
water table would be lower.
Yes, Courtney.
I just wanted to also clarify that with the manholes, we believe that there is a lot of problems with the manholes at that time because they had just done slip lining the whole beach. And, I mean, they're doing that, they're continuing that right now. So when you pull it up and then you set it back down, it takes a while for it to seal back up. And so that's a large reason why they were not functioning as well as they should have been. And then the cost of them, when we were going through the study itself, we decided to, you just blanket a cost, knowing that some of them will be incredibly cheap, but then some of them are more difficult to deal with, and they're going to be more than what we estimated individually, and so there was just this blanket cost across. I don't know if we can say definitively that none of this is really causing a problem. I think what we can say is that the smoke testing didn't identify a lot of laterals in this instance. But it did identify quite a bit of cleanout caps, and I think that was a big issue. When you have a hole like this and water sheet flowing over, that's a big contributor to the I&I. So I think what we can do is look at the overall program, and as we get other cities and other areas in the county coming in with smoke testing, I think that will add to our data set of whether or not laterals are a problem across the county. Because I think you can't really use the beach as an indicator for the entire county.
Mm-hmm.
We have totally different conditions over there. And it's a different area. So
I agree, and part of the reason I strongly supported this, Courtney, was your suggestion that the beach is such a harsh environment that if there was anywhere that was going to show problems with laterals, it was going to be beachside. And
well, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of demographic contributions to whether laterals get replaced as well, particularly income. And so you have an area on the beach where people have the ability in many ways to go ahead and do those improvements, but you have whole neighborhoods that are on sewer in other parts of the county that have significant lateral problems. In fact, there's CDBG funds and things like that in other cities and the county that are used to help people replace those already today.
And I believe COCO has this testing planned, and we're waiting for that result to come in. But at least so far, it's quite encouraging that laterals are not a major contributor. Now, the other problems that have been identified to the I&I are a major contributor, and the benefit of public education on this entire system has been a benefit of this program. But the idea that laterals are a significant contributor of nutrients into the groundwater, I think this research has pretty much said they're not.
So,
And can I respond, just that COCO does not have any smoke testing planned.
Oh, I thought you
I
said
hope,
they did.
well, because...
Cocoa Beach is on.
Yeah, I thought that, but it turned out they don't. I hope they do, because during my campaigning, and particularly speaking to the educational benefits, there were numerous caps that were off, and there was even one household that was diverting stormwater in that direction because they assumed that's what it was for.
Yeah. A lot of people take them off because they want to get the water out of their yard.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd like to add. This will never stop until we figure, unless there's some alternatives, because this is a maintenance type thing. I can assure you, utilities with very robust smoke testing programs, you have to go back to the same areas over and over and over, because you can fix every problem in an area, and if you come back in 5 years, there will be a whole slew of new problems. They get these get hit by lawnmowers. They have people take them off. That is very, very common. If stormwater systems aren't effective, people that want to get rid of the stormwater will go pop a clean out cap and it's gone. And all of a sudden you have a 4-inch hole that puts a lot of water into the sewer. That there are some utilities that have gone to burying these so they're not as easily accessible. This is an ongoing issue, and to me that becomes part of our discussion, is how best to use our money, and what are we trying to achieve with whatever we're investing. As long as we're clear on that and have that appropriate discussion about what is it we expect to get out of this so that we know what we're getting for our money, I'm good. I think this will be an area for all utilities on an ongoing basis. It represents a maintenance issue.
There's another aspect to this as well, and that's simply code. We have cities that have land development codes and other zoning requirements. We have county code. I don't think, and this is something that, if I'm not correct, needs to get fixed. I don't think the code allows people to introduce raw sewage into their yard. I don't think the code allows people to have septic systems that are not functional. And so it should, question A, is the code appropriate to the requirements of this day and age in the various places that write code? And B, is there a code enforcement problem to deal with these issues?
That is an excellent point.
Yep.
And our city is actually drafting a code right now that makes it basically illegal to remove your cleanout cap.
Send me a copy, please, because we're rewriting land development code in Cocoa Beach as we speak.
Well, I'm drafting it. I want the utility to look at it and make sure the
Yep.
county's okay with it, and then we'll
I'll
be
highlight it,
sending
I'll
it
get
out.
it to
yeah.
Randy, we'll work something.
all right. Thank you for the discussion. Yes, Virginia?
So thank you for the discussion, and we will try to come up with some clarifying language in the plan. So I totally, that's great advice to be clear on our objectives. On the groundwater pollution, we had thought that the monitoring wells, that the 50 monitoring wells that we put in around the county, that if there was a large leaking lateral issue in the Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor Beach area, that those groundwater monitoring wells would show us that. Because we are seeing that this may be a very discrete location and not a regional sort of problem, I think we need to go back through our sampling plan and maybe seek permission from these 30 properties where we know there are leaking laterals, if we can collect groundwater there and look for a signal so that we can estimate what the impact of leaky laterals is. In the Turkey Creek area, where we've been collecting information in a sewered neighborhood for a year now, there is one site that is always significantly higher than the other two. And So our theory is that there's a leak. We don't know whether it's from that home or a neighbor, or, we don't know how close it is, but we're seeing some sort of signal there. So we can look at our respond budget and come up with a design to try to use these 30 sites, or, a subset of those 30 sites to collect that groundwater information. That's a really a good point. We have not answered that question. The funding that you approved for this pilot project was based solely on I&I reduction. We looked at the amount of overflows that occurred over the last 13 years, and we averaged that out. We multiplied by concentration data from available overflows to come up with a loading impact to the lagoon and annualize that, and that's how we came up with the 840,000. So even if there isn't a groundwater pollution problem, the I&I reduction value is in line with what's in the plan. But it would, if we can document a groundwater pollution problem as well, then there's an additional benefit that is not being captured in that math.
You'll agree, however, there were a tremendous amount of assumptions and estimates in that I&I contribution. I couldn't make the math work, but it was a lot of assumptions based on that number, which translates into dollars, which is where my concern is, that we need to focus the limited amount of money that we have on actually having an impact on the lagoon.
Chair? Sorry, just one more comment. Going back to the idea where, the utilities should be doing this as a regular maintenance program, I'm wondering if that could be part of the application for smoke testing to us, that we ask them to identify how they're going to continue that on their own afterwards. And maybe that might be part of their, part of the agreement with us, that we pay for the first round and then they have to demonstrate how they're going to continue on that.
I think that type of connectivity is great, and we are in a gray area, because it's in that area between where we are trying to be a positive influence to significant change in the community, and the utilities play a long-term role in that as well. And how to get that kickstart going, I think, is a phenomenal use of our funds, and being able to tie that together to have some reasonable assurance that we are contributing to creating sustainable practices and that we're moving forward in a positive direction, for me is, I will say personally, I feel like it is spot on with where we need to be at, so that it's not, my fear is I don't want to just have a one-time dollar that then goes away in a couple of years.
Right. That's a good
That,
point.
to me, is not good use of it. But as we start to connect this into long-term, sustainable, and positive impacts, I think we're very much in the right spot.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Virginia?
Okay, so on presentations this month, I'll just highlight, we met with the audit committee, and that was a very favorable audit. They are not able to present that to you today. They're hoping to be here for your December meeting, but things are looking good on the audit front.
Were there any findings?
There was one finding. There were no findings for any of the county implemented projects. There was one finding in the reimbursement request processing for a city project where we missed one piece of paper we should have had in that reimbursement package. So we now have a checklist that we've implemented for staff to make sure they've got all the pieces, parts, and we've added some check boxes for the cities to make sure they're including all the right pieces, parts. So hopefully we have addressed that problem in the future.
Catch this stuff.
The upcoming lagoon forums, we've talked about the Shore Symposium coming up November 30th. The announcement just went out for the Indian River Lagoon Symposium at Harbor Branch. February 7th is the big symposium day, and then February 8th is more of a round table kind of discussion, but that's always a great event down at Harbor Branch. And So on the future topics for special presentations, December, I think we're going to have a very busy meeting with lots of great presentations. We have the number 3 there, the peer review for the plan. We did the survey. We closed the comments for that last week. We got the initial analytics. Holly Abeels with University of Florida IFAS program is analyzing those, and she will be presenting those results to you in December.
What's your gut feel on it? Was it worthwhile or not?
It was very interesting that, in general, people want to spend more on everything. And, so even though we tried to pose the question, if you want to spend more in this, what are you going to spend less in? The majority wanted to spend more in every single category. There was some interesting feedback on things people didn't like, and a lot of that, I think, is because we are not doing a good enough job explaining why we are doing some of the things we're doing, and so there's some good messages there on what we need to be communicating better.
This may have a Hawthorne effect, and that's always good.
I saw that Dr. James Sullivan, who's the executive director for Harbor Branch, gave a presentation on harmful algal blooms in the state of Florida. And different harmful algal blooms at different times of the year in different regions of the state and why. It looked like a fascinating presentation. I reached out to him, and he is planning to come to you in December. And then Dr. Drew Palmer, we will hope to have him back on the ongoing muck research. And that is the staff report. The fiscal report, you'll notice that the graph changed. So we've added, in the course of adding a third year to our projections, when you continue to run that out as one graph, the way we used to, all the lines were just, on top of each other. You couldn't see anything. So we've done this stacked approach. Hopefully this will work for us. And so on the lower lines, you see that lowest gray line was our initial projection. When we moved into the second year, we revised our projected revenues to the blue dotted line. And then the purple, so you see the purple actuals tracking very well with our revised projection, both of which are lower than the state's projection. And then for this coming fiscal year, we show the state projection as well as our county projection, and we'll be filling in those actuals as they
Is
arrive.
the difference between those two lines the tithing that we give to the county? We pay a surtax to the county, 5%, whatever it is, or at least it's held back out of our budget and reserved by the county, correct?
The 5%
If the sales tax gives us
statutory
$1 million,
reduction?
sales tax gives us $1 million, we can't spend $1 million out of the county's coffer. They keep a chunk of it.
No.
No, there's a required holdback. It's shown in our budget.
Yeah.
It doesn't say we can't spend it. That it's just a percentage that's held back on any of these kind of taxes.
And then that would not be the delta between those two lines.
Correct.
And that's just
Correct.
budgeting.
Right, so there is a statutory reduction of 5%
That's
that you
what I-
can't spend during this fiscal year, but if
It
you
rolls.
actually collect it, it rolls forward to the next year. But this is just a difference in the
Same with your
state's
ad valorem.
projection of what they thought we would collect versus actuals.
Thank you.
That's my report.
All right. Thank you, as always, for all the work that you and your committee go through to make these presentations to us every month. Dr. Gary Zarillo?
So while Dr. Zarillo comes up, I was fortunate enough to be able to start working with him about 20 years ago on beach renourishment. He's a geologist, and so he was analyzing cores for the county as we try to identify beach quality sand and offshore borrow areas. And so I spent some time in his driveway working on cores for the beaches. And so it's really great to be able to work with him now on this modeling for lagoon water quality. This is work that was funded by the National Estuary Program with a healthy sponsorship from Port Canaveral Authority, and Bob Muster is here from the port as well. And so with that, Dr. Gary Zarillo.
Okay, thank you. So we just completed this work a month or two ago. I gave a presentation up at the port a few weeks ago. Numerical modeling flushing experiments to try to improve flushing rates up in mostly the north end of the Banana River. And so the presentation outlined here, several steps. I'm going to go pretty quickly through this. So I'll give you after we go through the project goals, we'll actually present the conclusions up front, so you can have that in your head as we look at some of the devil in these details. So we're applying the numerical modeling to look at flushing rates in the Banana River and one of the northern compartments of the Indian River Lagoon. We want to quantify the potential for improving the state of water quality by promoting more rapid flushing in the subcompartments, particularly between the causeways that I'll be talking about. So I'll use that term a couple of times, compartments. So to get to the conclusions right away, one of the most important conclusions is that in order to get some significant improvement in flushing of the Banana River, you have to deal with both 528 causeways and 520 at the same time. And if you do that, you might be able to improve flushing rates on the order of 9 to 10% in selected areas. We also ran some scenarios that involved relief structures in the causeways. We have a few now, and increasing that by quite a number, and that will provide a marginal improvement. And I wrap this all up at the end in a table that shows the compares the percent improvement with respect to the existing condition. So what the modeling platform, I can't belabor that except to say it's the U.S. Army Corps' coastal modeling system. Has a lot of capabilities, was actually first developed by one of my students in the mid-1990s and then taken over by the Army Corps. It's kind of the workhorse modeling scheme. It combines both circulation and waves. So in this particular model run, we have wind stress at the surface, and we can generate waves within the model. So we have waves, tides, changing in water elevation, all of that, all the physical processes that we need. There's something in the model called the computational grid. It's just a series of cells, 50 by 50 meters. And on the left-hand side, you can see the overall computational model goes from the Wabasso area, northern Indian River County, right up to the north end of the Banana River. And includes one of the northern compartments of the IRL just before we kind of reach the Haulover Canal region. And on the right-hand side, you see some of the details in the model, sort of as is configuration, and you can see that we've taken a lot of care to resolve the causeways and the existing relief structures. We have the Barge Canal in there, we have Sykes Creek. You can also see the port itself is in there, but it is not connected to the Banana River. It's sealed off. Just to give you a visual on some of the structures that are represented in the model, Sebastian and features Sebastian Inlet, Sebastian River, Melbourne Bridge, all the bridges, 520 Bridge Causeway, 528 Bridge Causeway. You also have the railroad causeway at the north end of the Banana River as well. In the scene on the right, you see a little bit of the results of one of the simulations, and I'll have a color-coded legend to explain exactly what that means. It's important to have realistic model inputs, so our actual model year is 2015, and so the so-called model boundary conditions will be, in addition to the topographic features of the IRL in the inlets and so forth, we have discharges from Ogallie River, Turkey Creek, Sebastian River, and a number of other smaller creeks. We have water level applied, a time series of water level down at the Wabasso Bridge, Sebastian Inlet. We also apply wind stress, wind velocity at the surface of the model. So these are called model boundary conditions. Just a word or two about model validation. You can see this is comparison of the Lansing Island monitoring station maintained by Robert Weaver and his students in my department. And this is a long-running data collection scheme, and you can see a comparison between the model water level and the Lansing Island water level. The signature of the water level here is interesting, and this has not really been, you can see that there's no tidal signal. Of course, way up here, and even in the southern end of the Banana River, far from the coastal ocean, there's no tidal signal. But you can see over the course of a year, this is 2015, we have a low stand of sea level kind of in mid-July, high stand of sea level kind of mid to late October. This is driven by variations in the Gulf Stream. What happens in the coastal ocean doesn't stay in the coastal ocean. These low-frequency water level oscillation propagates right into the far reaches of the Indian River Lagoon system, and the low stand to the high stand difference is it's almost 3 feet. And then for the remainder of the year, we have some bumps up and down of sea level driven by winds and storms and atmospheric pressure, but that main big signal that you see is driven by the Gulf Stream. So we have about 3 feet of sea level rise and fall every year, and it has a tremendous effect. In itself, causes some flushing, at least at the annual scale. So that's something that few people really recognize, but it's an important piece of information. So here are 4 model scenarios, and I cannot review all of them, so I've just selected a few of them that provide us with some good results. The model duration is about 340 days. It takes about 2 days or 2 to 3 days on the computer to run this. We have our existing configuration. Model scenario 2 is adding a 528 bridge span across the Indian River Lagoon. Model scenario 3 is adding a bridge span across 528 and 520. This is the one that has the most benefits. This corresponds also with Model Run 4, where we do the same bridge spans across the north end of the IRL and across the Banana River. Then we double bridge spans through both of the areas of Model Run 7 are flow relief structures, Model Run 8 combined flow relief structures on 528 and 520. And then number 9 has some marginal benefits where we just increase the number of flow structures, particularly on the 528 causeway. So I'll just touch on a few of these. Here is a representation of the existing condition. You can see the causeways 528 and 520 to the south. The white arrows point to the existing relief structures or short span bridges. You can also see the port up there on the right and the barge canal going over to the north end of the IRL. This is the only animation I really have time to run. This is the existing configuration, and you can see the color-coded legend. The darker colors, red colors, indicate 20 parts per thousand of numerical dye put into the model, and then as you see the colors go to blue, means the dye has been flushed out of the system or diluted. And on the right-hand side, you can see a zoom in of that portion of the north end of the system. And it's taken to the end of the 340 days for any of that benefit from flushing of Sebastian Inlet, fresh water coming in from some of the tributaries and canals, for that benefit to reach even the south end of the Banana River. So I hope you follow the animation on that. And maybe I'll just run it one more time just so your eye can follow it. So we're seeing nothing happening on the right-hand side. We're waiting for the flushing benefits to reach the Banana River. We're about a third of the way in. You can see the bar scale on the upper left-hand side tracking the time period. We're about halfway through, 160 days or so. Now we're two-thirds. And again, you can see that, as we all know, the northern compartments of the IRL, Banana River, poorly flushed. Okay, so now What happens if we just select 5 numerical monitoring stations? You can see them on your screen in these compartments that I've set up, 1, 2, 3 compartments in the Banana River, and compartment 4 and 5 in the Indian River Lagoon. So we have a numerical monitoring station which extracts the dye concentrations versus time through the model run, and that data is plotted for all 5 stations on the left-hand side. And you can see that the scale goes from about 15 to 20 parts per thousand. We start out with 20 parts per thousand. Right now, the north end of the IRL, compartments 4 and 5, are a little more better flushed, more well flushed than the Banana River. But still the concentrations drop only to about 17 parts per thousand after 340 days. So we get some flushing. The station 5 is the worst. If you want to use those terms, that's up in compartment, that is in station 5 is, 3, compartment 3 and 5 have the poorest flushing at this point in time because they're north of the causeways, the north end of the IRL and the Banana River. The other ones are kind of in between. So our model run 2, we just add a bridge span as shown on the right-hand side across 528. It's in the model report, which is available to you. I think you can link up to the Port Authority website and download all of the animations in the report. So we have a bridge span a few thousand feet long, replacing the relief structures. We maintain the relief structures in 520 to the south. Existing configuration is shown on the left-hand side. So what happens after about a year-long simulation in the model? I can plot that area in terms of this color-coded legend showing the dye concentration, and it's hard to see the difference between the two. So let me take stations, compare model runs 1 and 2 at station 2, and that's the compartment between the 528 and the 520 bridge. And you can see that there's not much difference once you just add one span across 528. They're almost identical with a little bit of decrease in the overall dye concentration at station 2 in the compartment. So, and going over to station 3 above 528 in the north part of the Banana River, it's hard to see any difference in the concentration over the 340-day model run. So I hope you're with me on that. Really no benefit. So let's go to model run 3, which combines a fairly long spans across 528 and 520. So we're replacing the existing causeway structures with fairly long bridge spans. And so if we go there and look at the reduction of dye concentration over 340 days, you can't really see very much in the plot. But if you look at station 2 time series for model runs 1, 2, and 3, station 2, where we have both the 528 and the 520 spans combined together, you can certainly see a difference. And at its peak benefit around day 322, the concentrations in compartment 2 reduced to about 16.5 parts per thousand. Again, there's a lot of variability over time because this water is sloshing back and forth, forced by the winds, changes in the coastal ocean propagating up here, so there's a lot of variability, but the overall result is that there's a divergence in the reduction of dye between the existing condition, model run 2 with just the 528 bridge, and model run 3 with both the 528 and 520 bridges. And moving over to station 3, up to station 3 above 528, you can see that divergence. And so you definitely have some detectable, measurable reduction in the dye concentration, i.e. improvement in flushing, by having the combination of the two bridges just to the south. So let's go to the 4-bridge situation, which I call it in the model report, where we have long spans across both the IRL and the Banana River associated with the 528 and 520 bridges. Again, you can't really see very much in sort of the planimetric plot, but let's go to the station 2. It's basically identical to the previous model run. We're looking at the right-hand side of the Banana River, so we have some measurable, detectable reduction, differences in dye concentration reduction. If we move over to station 4 on the north end of the Indian River Lagoon between the 528 and 520 bridges, that compartment, that area is initially a little more well-flushed than the Banana River, but we do see some benefits by putting a bridge span across both causeways. So there's a detectable improvement in flushing rate there. So now we go to, this is Model Run 9, flow relief structures, and I've skipped over a couple of the model runs which really didn't show much benefit. So now we have multiple flow relief structures on the 520 causeway, additional 2 flow structures on the 520, 3 flow relief structures on 528, and on the Banana River side, and 4 flow relief structures in addition to the existing bridge spans on 528 in the IRL side. And here are the results, and they're actually between, we're looking at Station 2, Compartment 2 in the Banana River, and these results with the flow structures plot right between the existing condition for Model Run 1 and Model Run 3, where we have both bridge spans, so right in between. So that's Station 2. I call this Model Run Relief 4. So there are some detectable benefits, but not as much as having the combination of the spans on both 528 and 520. And moving over to 4, we can kind of see the same result. Really not much improvement by adding the relief structures in both the 528 and 520 causeways on the IRL side compartments on the west side. So the main benefit is seen over on the Banana River for the so-called flow relief structure model run. So summing this all up and bolding the most detectable, the largest changes would be, compared to the existing configuration, would be model runs 3 and 4. And I'm looking at those compartments, stations 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I point you to Station 2, which is that compartment between the 528 and 520 bridges, if you will, and we get about 9 to 10% improvement at that particular monitoring station. And then detectable improvement in some of the other compartments with an overall average for model runs 3 and 4, 3.3 to 4.4%, and then dropping down to model run 9, which is the additional flow relief structures, some marginal improvements, but definitely less, detectably less than model runs 3 and 4. So again, the conclusions, modification of the 528 and 528 causeway bridges would likely improve flushing on the order of 9 to 10% in selected areas, if you will. And significant improvement in the Banana River compartments requires both some alterations on the State Road 520 and State Road 528 in combination. And then we see marginal improvement in flushing action predicted by the model cases involving multiple flow relief structures on the 528 and 520, particularly on the Banana River side. So there it is, rapid fire. So did I make my time limit?
You were a little over, but
Okay.
it was so interesting that I didn't want to stop you. You wanted to hear the conclusion.
Sir.
What's the advantage of flushing?
Advantage of flushing, the one thing I can start to say, is that historically, of course, the IRL would be flushed several times a year by overwashing of the Barrier Island temporary inlets. Since, I would say, the late 19th century, the early 20th century, we have stabilized our inlets. We have tried to stabilize the Barrier Island system, so that natural process no longer happens. Occasional flushing is good because you can flush out some of the pollutants, concentrations of materials, particularly in times when there is not a lot of flushing by wind or flushing by changes in the coastal sea level. So if you can manage that a little bit, you can definitely improve the water quality. There was a new inlet that was cut by Hurricane Sandy at the eastern end of Long Island, cut into Great South Bay, which is kind of a sister estuary to the IRL. And in that case, it did provide notable improvement in reduction of nutrients, did change the salinity regime a bit, did not really change the tidal regime. So there's other case studies that show that introducing coastal ocean water, as nature did historically, would have some positive benefits. Of course, that would have to be studied a little bit more, quantified exactly what the benefits would be in terms of the nutrient cycling, nutrient budget, and so forth, salinity regime, temperature regime. So there are some definite benefits, I think, by having some improved flushing. Particularly of the Banana River. We know that a lot of the HABs start up in this area, then spread to the south. So maybe having improved flushing would limit the occurrence of HABs. Could be one potential benefit.
But the strategy we're following now, I don't think our compartments from a dollar allocation viewpoint exactly match yours. The strategy we're following now is to get the bad stuff out and keep the bad stuff out and treat them basically as static pools.
Yeah.
And we pray that'll be effective. When you start looking at dollars to crank in some big new bridges and the politics behind that, we may be wishing for something that'd be very hard to get.
Yeah. Well, let me say this about that. As a New Jersey native and a longtime observer of the Jersey coast, I noticed that all of the causeways that I traveled over to the Barrier Islands in the 1950s and 1960s have all been replaced by high-span bridges, except for Atlantic City. For whatever reason, all of the gambling money, they still have two causeways that are just a couple of feet above sea level, but everything else has been totally replaced. I have no idea why. I have an idea why, but I think the other benefit, of course, eventually you're going to have to raise those causeways. I mean, they're going to wear out, sea level's going to rise, they're going to be continually flooded. We have some flooding now. Eventually you'll have to do it. I mean, I'm not advocating one way or another, I'm just trying to present what the conclusions and the results of the model. So that's kind of your, that's a political decision, economic decision.
Do we have any economic data on what the cost would be to?
That would be a question maybe for Bob Musser or Virginia. It's a lot of money, of course. But,
Gallery.
Yes.
So I have a question, but I want to make a statement of principle, and that is, my principle is that flushing is not the solution. We're already killing the offshore reefs by the stuff that flows out of the Indian River Lagoon now. So I think our primary objective of let's get this stuff out and keep the more bad stuff from coming in is where I think our focus ought to be. I thank you very much for this presentation. I enjoyed it. My question has to do with this. I guess I don't understand the dye distribution process, because I don't understand how the concentration can drop and then increase as time goes by.
Because of the dynamics of the estuary, you'll notice this is in part connected to changing wind patterns on an annual basis, also oscillation of coastal sea level. And so don't think of the system as just flowing north to south or south to north. Think of a slug of water with salinity, nutrients, dye, whatever, just moving about back and forth. And, it moves like this, but maybe over time there's a net movement. So as you change, as conditions change through a season, an annual cycle, you're going to get a lot of back and forth. And so in some cases, you reduce the concentration, replace it by water, but that ultimately moves back to the north. So it's a little bit, it's one step forward, two steps back.
So I guess I should have realized this. So the dye is introduced throughout the 5 areas at the same concentration?
We start with an initial concentration of 20 parts per thousand.
Okay, got it. Thank you very
I
much.
could, through the model run, keep adding dye, but I just put that slug in there of dye, and it's uniform through the whole system. And so as new water comes in from the coastal ocean, from the watersheds on the west, that gets diluted and replaced, and it disperses south and west. If you look carefully at the video, you can also see some of that material, some of the water move across the barge canal. So you get these sort of weak exchanges between and among the compartments. If you look closely, you could see, at least in the initial existing condition, some of the dye, essentially water being trapped by the causeways, and just a little bit of flow across what the existing bridge structures.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Sure.
For those of us that have lived in that area of focus for decades, it was very interesting to actually see what we witness as the river goes up and down, completely driven by wind, or at least that was my belief prior to something you said here, completely driven by wind and season. And as the northeast winds start to blow in, the water moves to the south or moves across. I didn't realize, and very interesting, that the Gulf Stream's influence on the height of inland waters. I mean, that to me is brand new, fresh information. There's been a lot of discussion among primarily recreational anglers, and research done previously, though I've never seen it demonstrated as well as you have, that the flow, I'll use that term, wind-driven primarily, flow within the Banana area, particularly in the northern Indian River, has been dramatically limited over the years by the causeways. And as 528, as part of the master plan in East Central Florida, is being expanded, I know that some discussions have attempted to be held by Virginia and her staff, by Port and others, to encourage new, larger bridges. I mean, they're going to expand the highway, so this would be the appropriate time. Yes, it's going to be expensive, but they're already going to do it. So I'm wondering if anyone, if your presentation has had any impact on FDOT, if anybody there, I heard the other day, and I don't know if there's any basis on this, that FDOT was actually considering removing some or all of the causeways on 528 when they're doing this expansion, which I would applaud, whether it's a 2% increase or a 10% increase or anything to allow the water to flow, because there are large dead areas of those rivers because the wind can't move them, and the grasses have died and the fish aren't there. So does anybody know if we're making any progress with FDOT on this?
I think the port would be able to give the best answer to that question.
And who at the port would I call?
You would call Bob Musser, who's the environmental director. So
Thank
he has
you.
Right over there.
his ear on that. He's sitting in the audience, by the way. Just one more comment on the wind exchanges. The way you need to think about the system is time scale by time scale. So we have our annual time scale, and we do get flushing of the system, but it may take a year or longer, corresponding to the rise and fall of sea level, because we exchange at least 50% of the Indian Lagoon volume by just raising and lowering sea level. The lagoon's only on the average of 3 or 4 feet deep, and we have a 3-foot or meter rise and fall. So we have a tremendous exchange of water, but it's slow. It's an annual cycle. And then the wind takes over at shorter time scales, sort of the synoptic meteorological time scale. So things are moving like this, while sea level is going like this, and so they combine together for a net flushing fast or slow. And so you need to think about all of these different forcings on the lagoon. So don't think of it just as wind-driven. Think of it wind-driven, okay, fortnightly, a couple of weeks, the weather systems come through, and then also driven by slow annual exchange of sea level. Other forcings will be evaporation, groundwater. I had a student work on the Indian River Lagoon back in the late 1990s, and he showed that over really long time scales, the water balance is between groundwater and evaporation, but that's a super long time scale. So the time scale is everything. So wind is short time scale, synoptic, no tides up there. So that would be a 12-hour semi-diurnal time scale, just doesn't exist up there. So we have wind-driven, we have sea level change, and then everything else, minor creeks and rivers and streams and groundwater and evaporation. It's a big ball of wax. So you need to compartmentalize those processes to truly understand how it works.
Thank you.
So, all right. Anything, any other questions?
Courtney?
I actually don't have a question for you, but I thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
It was very informative. I agree with John, though. I think, we have, it's a little outside of our league to do this, to do anything like this, but it's definitely, I think we can be an advocate so to make sure that these issues are a consideration by the DOT and the TPO when we're looking at programming changes to the causeways, because I know that, and Georgiana's here with the TPO, she could probably answer this better than me, but we are looking at 520 and looking at that causeway, not just because it needs to be expanded, but it's also because of sea level rise and the height of the causeway needs to be addressed. So maybe at those points we can add in these issues to the conversation and see if we can get some additional flow back to the lagoon as and it may not be a strong focus of the committee because we are looking at removal and not putting it back in, but the fact that we also want to look at trying to put it back to where it used to be as much as possible, and I think we could be certainly be advocates in getting that done, so I agree. I think it is something that we need to be focused on in that respect, not necessarily spend any money or anything like that, but, being that advocate and making sure that these things get considered when these replacements start happening.
And I wonder, not for this year's plan that we're working on now, but perhaps next year, there might not be a thing, coda at the end of it that says, these are things that are not under the cognizance of the trust fund, but would have a major impact on the effective application of trust fund dollars.
Right.
And it's a bullet list with a short paragraph of each. Let's take care of the causeways, et cetera, ain't our circuit, sewer treatment, wastewater, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's a short hit list.
Right.
It's a 10 most wanted list that we can't, we can name, we can't advocate for it, but I think we can identify. It might even be, one of us could write it in about a half hour. Maybe we do want to crank it in the next plan.
But I think it's great that you all have, these analysis going, and I think, the fact that the TPO is here and the board, that shows that we need to start, meshing these things together and really making sure that we include all these considerations when we do such big, large projects like this,
Yeah, I don't want to suggest that the IRL tax money should be used to change the bridge, and I hope that was not the impression.
No, you did not. No.
Okay, because that is not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be focusing on, however, understanding the hydrology and the environment that we're dealing with, I think is very important, and understanding that there are things that other groups have responsibility for, FDOT, et cetera, that are well outside of our purview, but can have an impact upon what we're doing and what the public wants, which is the restoration of this lagoon, I think is important.
And supporting the research.
I would agree with
And supporting the research, too. I think that's something that we definitely need to be involved in.
All right, thank you very much. Chip? Welcome.
Hey there, I'm Jeff Rapolti, engineer with Brevard County Stormwater Utility, and I'm going to go over some of our full-scale pilot test, filtration, biosorption activated media projects, bioreactors that we have going on. Let's skip through this. You guys are familiar with eutrophication and nutrient loading. So there's several different approaches to how you can deal with nutrients depending on what form they're in terms of selecting a media or a media blend to use in stormwater treatment systems. So we can go to the background now. That's the basis of these projects. So in 2014, Brevard County Commissioners adopted a resolution to increase annual stormwater utility fee, and that provided necessary funding to begin implementing these projects, and to produce projects that balance nutrient loading reductions with cost effectiveness, and further analysis is needed to better understand how these various media blends will perform here in Brevard County. There's been lots of research done in labs in different areas of the country, but we want to figure out how they can perform right here so we can take this and apply it to projects such as soil projects and other projects that are funded through the stormwater utility fee. So we're going to go over 2 full-scale pilot studies that are being implemented, and one's in the works, one's to be constructed next year. So the first one is Johnson Junior High School in Melbourne, and we got a 2.8 acre retention pond that we are retrofitting to bleed down the inflow into the pond through a series of 3 denitrification chambers. They're 250 feet long, 4-foot diameter pipes, and each one contains a different blend of media to treat the stormwater. And then it discharges it into the normal outfall, which then ends up in the Ogallie River and discharges to the IRL. There's some of the pictures of the design specs. Basically what we have is a manhole with a pipe to the pond that reaches equilibrium. We have a floating constant head regulator to discharge water into a manifold system, which splits the flow evenly. When we have valves to adjust so that each chamber receives the same amount of flow. It then flows into these pipes at the bottom, perforated pipe, up through the media, collects in another perforated pipe and out, and then rejoins in another manifold and discharges into the outfall structure. Here's a couple pictures of the construction. So here you can see the chambers. This is the manifold. This is the manhole that reaches equilibrium with the pond level. And inside there is this, it's what's called a thirsty duct. It's a flow regulator that provides a constant head, constant flow rate. So we have 0.9 CFS split amongst all 3 chambers. And we have the ability to add overflow to that with this pipe over here if we needed to. But right now that's capped. And here it is looking north along the bank. It combines in a manifold right after these 3 sampling ports and then discharges towards the east. And there's an influent sampling port here. We also are able to collect samples into the pond to determine the pond's level of effectiveness in addition to the media. So our sampling plan for this is precipitation event driven, a minimum of 12 hours following a 1-hour rainfall event of at least 1/8 of an inch, and 11 days since the last sampling event. We trigger our team to go out there and collect samples. We try and do this monthly, approximately. Sometimes it's 2 within a month, and sometimes we'll go 2 months without one, and we just have to make up for it. But we're trying to hit monthly, just depends on the rainfall. So I said we collect samples influent to the pond, influent to the chambers, effluent of the pond, and effluent of the chambers, and we analyze for ammonia, ammonium, TKN, nitrate, nitrite, ortho-P, and total phosphorus. TSS and dissolved organic carbon are quarterly sample events, and then we're going to switch to 2 sample events per year, starting in fiscal year 2019-20, just October and April only. We're going to continue this sampling for at least 2 years to determine stabilization for the nutrient reduction, both TN and TP, because removal rates are expected to stabilize after the first year of operation. And research has shown that those removal rates after that first year are pretty indicative of the long-term removal rates that are experienced for a system. So, take you into preliminary results. So far, our 24-hour precipitation is about 1/2 inch, plus or minus 0.36 inches, and a Harper study from 2007 or 2008 it was, I think, had 0.43 inches for the area was the average. So we're approaching the average from his decades of data analysis. But we'll see over the coming years where this falls. This is only for 12 events that we have so far. Our average sample interval, the 12 events, 28.73 days, and there's our cumulative precipitation between events. All right, so let's see.
Virginia, can this be sent to us by email later because it's virtually impossible to read on our screens?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, taking into account the inter-event variability of the previous slide, we looked for stabilization in the event percent reductions rather than just the individual concentrations. As you can, well, or as you can't see, some of you. At first, we had large oscillations in our influent concentrations and our effluent concentration, mainly our effluent concentration, through the 3 different biosorption activated medias. They're starting to stabilize. They're still oscillating. We're just now at the end of the first year, so next year we'll see how much more they stabilize, if so. But that's what we're waiting for. That's why these are considered preliminary results. So our, let's see here. If we analyze the event percent reduction data, we have our FAM effluent TN concentrations currently for the 12 samples we have ranging from 5 to 26%, for TN and TP 11 to 30%. Still, we have really large standard deviation here, indicating our stabilization's not yet worthwhile, I'd say. We still have a ways to go. Let's see. And that's for our percent reductions. If you want to look at the actual concentration data that resulted in that, you have 1.1 is our influent TN, 0.04 influent TP. This is after the pond and into the chambers. And then the chambers range from 1 to 0.81 on the outflow side. For TN, TP, they were at 0.35 to 0.027 on the outflow. Next project we have is not going to look at comparing media, but it's more focused on the variability of residence time and how that's going to affect the design of future systems. This project is going to occur at Fountainhead Park. The City of Melbourne is going to give us some land off on the side to put this project in, and we have it all designed and planned. We're hoping to get to construction next year. But it's a very similar approach to what we were doing with Johnson, just instead of 3 medias, we have a solar pump driven system, and we're going to be varying the flow rate through 2 separate parallel systems, high and low of a targeted, and then we're going to vary it, sample, and hopefully come up with an optimal contact time and flow rate to yield that. The sampling plan for this is different since it's not precipitation driven. We have the ability to get our results a little bit quicker. So for a specific flow rate, we're just going to grab samples, influent to and effluent of each of the media chambers for analysis of ammonia, ammonium, TKN, nitrate, ortho-P, and TP. On a weekly basis at the specified flow rate until nutrient reduction levels have stabilized. Sampling will continue on a monthly basis for approximately 3 months thereafter, and then removal rates are expected to stabilize within 60 to 90 days overall. So we have a shorter time frame with this since we have the pump control. We're not precipitation event driven. So this one will also continue for a longer period of time, a couple of years, but it's going to give us some good data for what we can look toward right here in Brevard County for future projects. Other data collection, on-site pH, salinity, DO, conductivity, temperature, and precipitation data will allow for ANCOVA to explore how variables might impact FAM performance in the future. There's a lot more to look into than just TNTP, but for right now, that's what we're summarizing with. This is summarizing 3 of the slides from earlier. Much smaller font, you probably can't see that since you had trouble with some of the earlier stuff. If you guys have any questions, you can contact me, and we'll get this out to you so you can look at it in a little more detail, see the plots, the tables. All right, you guys have any?
Thank you. So far on your initial data, which one's doing the best?
Right now we have, there's 2 commercial blends and 1 that's just a hardwood mulch, representative of hardwood mulch that we collect from the county's mulch recycling program. With that, you really only have an associated trucking hauling fee. You got to bring it to the site because all the rest pretty much they install the same way. So that's the lowest cost option. It's performing really well right now. But like I said, we're just now starting to approach stabilization. So they were swinging all over the place at first. It's really going to be hard to say. I don't want to say one's doing the best, but they're all performing. They're all removing right now. But this next year is really going to provide better data.
Will you be able at the end of this to quantify it in terms of cost per pound removed? Because that's the coin of the realm up here.
Yeah, we can.
I think that's an essential step. We would judge the goodness of this approach to mitigation in terms of what's it cost to get a pound of nitrogen out.
Yeah, and we'd look at it from a slightly different standpoint, because these 2 projects are much more unique than a typical application of this media would involve, because we're trying to have an experimental control. We're using chambers, which is an added cost, extra valves, piping, pumps, things that we want to do to control the project so we can, 3 chambers side by side, 4-foot diameter HDPE pipe adds a significant cost. Constant head thirsty duct added a significant cost. These things wouldn't be typical in a ditch lining project or a pond bank, where you could just put a liner in and tie in, where we'd actually use the media. So we can tie it to that, but yeah, we wouldn't look at the cost of these actual projects, just the cost of the media per pound removed. We'd want to look at that.
That would help us.
Yeah, John, you're absolutely right. And I appreciate all the additional stuff that you're doing, and essentially what we're going to find out is if any of these particular substances work significantly better than another one of the substances, and we're going to get an average of how much reduction in nutrients, in nitrogen specifically, is coming. All good. The coin of the realm for us is cost per. We're already paying for the last year and a half on these BAM projects in our 36 additional programs. So we're already paying for it. Not to challenge you, I want this basic research done, but then Virginia staff needs to take and find out if BAM is we need to look at the effectiveness and the cost per pound, because we're already paying for this, and I don't know if we're not paying enough or if we're paying too much, because we really don't know how good this stuff is. So, thank you.
Okay, and Madam Chair, so is Bold and Gold, is that one of the?
Yeah, one of their blends is. I think they have 20-something different blends. But
And what is it, the media itself has to be replaced? Does it need to be replaced, or is that just you put it in, it's permanent, or what is the maintenance, and does that change with any of the different products?
it depends on the fluctuation of the water table that could allow it to break down. So if you keep it submerged, it's pretty much indefinite. Nobody's found yet when the wood chips would need to be replaced when they're kept submerged. Same thing with some of the other blends, the Bold and Gold, I think EcoSense, they have an ECT3 Bold and Gold blend. But yeah, some of those have an inorganic component as well to address organic nitrogen in the influent, which isn't really an issue. Some of them use tire crumb. There's different components to these blends that don't necessarily have as high of an impact on longevity. But yeah, for the most part, if you just keep it saturated, what we've found from research.
If they had to be replaced, they would have, disposal would not be an issue, or there would be a beneficial use for the product you're replacing?
Yeah, we could work on that. I mean,
if there's not significant difference between the commercially available products, and I use that term loosely because I've been online of my neighbors trying to buy this stuff after it's been presented here, and you can't buy it anywhere that I can find. But if there's not a lot of difference in the effectiveness of using stuff that's coming out of our trash system right now, the landfill, where'd it come from again, the ground up wood?
Oh, the hardwood trees, the county landfill has the recycling program for yard waste.
Right.
And some of the landfills will set aside the hardwoods, your oak, your pine, the stuff that comes in, and they'll mulch that separately for us.
Yeah, so if we have this free source of mulch and it's not significantly more or less effective than the commercial products, which are effective, again, there may be a way for us to throw that number into the equation, and we could continue to support these BAM projects. But I think we do need to get a better understanding of how valuable these are, because we're paying $90-some per pound, and I'm not sure. It was all an estimate. We're all starting. We're all learning. But let's try to tighten it up.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what
thank
we
you.
want to do. We want to see how much more of a benefit you get from these other ones, if there is an additional benefit. So.
Yeah.
Jeff, you showed the TN data, but you also analyzed the ammonia and the nitrates, which are the favorite foods of different things blooming in the lagoon, and I think the removal rates are better for those components. The percent removals are...
Yes, with some of the media blends they are, with some of them they aren't. It depends on how much of an inorganic component you have to treat it up front when your DO is higher. In this case, right after it goes through the thirsty duct where you have a falling water and a DO, it increase, and after it had its residence time in the pond. Some of those medias do offer that benefit up front, and then in the end they may not make it up in terms of nitrite. The organic media form, they may not make it up, and another one that's completely organic may pull out a lot more in terms of the overall TN picture. So that's one of the things we're looking at. Looking at individually, what is our problem and our target? Is it to just get a larger amount of TN overall, or the organic up front? So that's why we're collecting all the different, analyzing for all the different parameters up front, so we can look at it more in depth. So right now, like I said, this is only just preliminary.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. Can't wait until next year to see what the results are. All right. Dylan.
We're going to take a break.
Oh, do we get a break?
We can. We can do a break.
No? How much do we left?
While we're waiting for him to get
We don't
set
have
up,
that
how
much
about if we
left.
do, yeah, we're close.
No.
We can do a 5-minute break. So 10:22, we'll be back.
When my husband and I first started dating, we were long distance. He grew up here and works at Kennedy Space Center. I was working in Washington, D.C. on water policy. When I would visit,
we would set the alarm early, walk down to a neighbor's dock, drink coffee, watch the dolphins and the manatee as they would hunt their morning breakfast. The sun would come up. It was so beautiful. And I fell in love with the lagoon, and I fell in love with my husband. So fast forward after we were married, and the opportunity came up to work on restoring the lagoon through the Citizen Oversight Committee. With a career in water policy and communications and water conservation and quality issues, I jumped on the opportunity to be a part of the solution. I think the biggest challenge that we face is having patience with this plan. We know that it's science-based, data-driven. We know that it's worked in other places. In fact, it's the only thing that has worked in places like Tampa Bay, Chesapeake Bay. So we need to have patience with it. We need to support it. We need to do what we can to get our own municipalities to support it and participate. Everyone needs to look in the mirror and ask themselves how they can be a better lagoon citizen. For our part, we are transitioning our lawn to a lagoon-friendly landscape. It's hard work, but it's paying off. We're collecting rainwater, but also we're getting involved at the municipal level in our city government. We recently helped found a sustainability advisory committee. We'll look at the bigger issues here, the policy issues, and make our city one of the leaders in restoring the lagoon. So my recommendation would be that everyone looks at how they can help be a better citizen for the lagoon.
Very nice.
And now here to
My name is John
accept the Oscar
Dirk.
for outstanding performance as
Yes,
a lagoon.
this is great.
All right, so here's number 2.
I don't want to.
My name is John Durkee.
Oh, no.
Start, yeah.
My name is John Durkee. We're here at Kelly Park, kind of a place where my children grew up. I remember 200 yards south of here with my boys when they were young wading, and the grass was, up to their waist. We fished for trout. We watched the dolphins and the manatees. They learned to sail, and in the wintertime, the water was gin clear, and I could sight fish and watch the big trout follow and eat my fly. I mean, we grew up around the river. This is our life. It's part of our life. It's been really difficult to watch all of the lagoon, and particularly here on the Banana, as the changes in the last couple of decades have taken the water from grass. There was beautiful grass out here. There's none any longer. The water is currently suffering from brown algae, which simply doesn't go away during the wintertime. The water was filled with we would come out and look at large tailing redfish, and there's just hardly any more of that. It's just been very difficult to watch the river deteriorate, and I guess if you took a snapshot and looked at the river 25, 30 years ago and then you went down here today, you wouldn't recognize it. But it's been gradual, and fortunately everybody seems now to recognize it, and hopefully we're turning things around. So what are the solutions to improving the Indian River Lagoon, or maybe restoring the lagoon and the rivers? It's reducing runoff from various sources, whether it be parking lots or highways, agriculture, our yards, fertilizers, we talk about that, and the runoff that comes from the roads and the streets. The county fortunately just passed a new regulation that essentially prohibits the old style septic tanks. There are houses within a half a mile of me right here on the river that still have septic tanks that essentially drain directly into the river. We won't have that anymore. It's going to take time. It took 50 years to create this problem. It's not going to clean itself up overnight. One of the reasons that I volunteered to serve on the Citizens Oversight Committee was to make absolutely certain that the tax monies that are being collected are being used for the intended purpose, and that is the restoration of the lagoon. That's why I'm a member of this group. I would like to say thanks to all of the volunteers, both who serve on the group and that attend the meetings, which are open to the public. The third Friday every month in Vieira. You can learn a lot and you can participate. We want and need public ideas and input. The citizens of this county, we recognize we created the problem and we decided to tax ourselves to bring about a solution. So I applaud everybody who's involved in a restoration solution throughout the Indian River Lagoon.
So I do have to say, this projector is better than the one upstairs. However, this one still has a dark side and a light side, but it's better than someone looking blue, like a Martian. So I'm trying not to give you guys too much of a hard time on these projectors, but they are butchering my work.
My name's Karen McLaughlin.
All right, this is the third one.
My name's Karen McLaughlin, and I'm one of the volunteers for the Save the Indian River Lagoon Oversight Committee. And it's just my small part of trying to be involved with the restoration of the lagoon. I started to get in the water and paddle and boat here, and I fell in love with the lagoon here. It is about 5 miles north of the Sebastian Inlet, and there's an abundance of wildlife here. There's dolphins, there's manatees, there's river otters. Recently, there's a return of 2 pairs of bald eagles, which I have not seen in 6 years. I'm proud to live here. I feel fortunate to live here. I inadvertently turned my passion and love for the water in the lagoon into a business. I kayak and I'm on the water when I'm not working and taking people out. So what I'm trying to do besides being on the Oversight Committee is encourage locals and visitors as much as possible of all the information that is out there. We've got websites. You can go to the meetings once a month. You can watch them. They're on audio and video. The involvement of the community is what's really going to help the scientists that have been begging for us to listen to them for a long time. And we're there. People are engaged and they're listening and they're getting involved, and changes are happening. You see it already, and it's only been a year. We're all doing this because we love the lagoon and we want to see it prosper and get healthy again. It's a healthy community in spots. It's not healthy in other spots, and we are trying to fix that. Fix it in one spot, fix it in another spot, the whole lagoon will get healthy again. You know, the fertilizer ban that was implemented 2 years ago, huge. Getting people off of septic. It's not going to happen right away. This happened over a long period of time. It's going to take time to fix, and I'm really, really positive, and I know it's going to get fixed. I couldn't imagine the lagoon not being here and not being a part of my life. I think with a little bit of education, science, caution, and citizen involvement and love for the lagoon and what's in our backyard, we're going to have a positive and a healthy lagoon again.
So that was 3. I definitely don't want to name names, but there's a couple of you that need to respond to my email. I pretty much filmed everybody, but there's a couple of you guys missing still, so definitely would appreciate some responses. Hope everyone enjoyed these. All right?
And for those of you who might be holding back,
So if you haven't done it yet, get in there so that we don't have to skip our frequency. So we'll be doing them in intervals, probably once a week, roll a new one out.
Okay, I'll call you back.
I know.
yeah, I just want to say for those shrinking violets, I know from having done a little investigation here that this man will do a significant amount of editing on your performance so that
Make it better.
what you do versus what you see up here will astound you. So, step up, he'll make it great.
Thank you.
Good work.
Thanks,
Good
Dylan.
work.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to new business and the proposed 2019 meeting schedule.
I move we accept the schedule. I said I move we accept. I can't vote. I can't even make a motion. Backbencher.
So we're meeting on the 8th? December 8th is our next meeting? Our December meeting, you said, was moved up to... It's not the 14th, or it is the 14th?
It is the 14th.
Okay.
So we are meeting them, okay.
This is the 2019.
This is 2019, that's why she's confused.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I would suggest instead of us voting on this schedule, that we use it as a baseline and put it in the hands of you or whoever is the chair next year and the Director of Natural Resources Management to maintain this, manage it, and keep us apprised as we go forward. I wouldn't be comfortable predicting what we need in November, et cetera. I think the reason we have a chair and the reason we have a den mother on county staff is to make decisions like that, and that's why I think it's best resolved.
I don't disagree with that, that there may need to be some changes made throughout the year, but I think that we do need to go ahead and set the schedule, and then as those changes are needed, we would go through and make those changes in a timely.
So one of the things that we did was we advertised all of the meetings at the beginning of the year, so people know what to expect and we hit those advertising requirements. Then we can cancel any meetings if we don't meet them, but at least they're on your schedules. They're on everybody's schedules in case we do meet them, and we can continue to work on the idea of having shorter meetings that are business only interspersed with the fuller meetings with presentations to reduce the time commitment of the staff and the committee members.
So, yes.
If you're going to advertise the meetings for the whole year, double check the dates. I think some of those dates are wrong. They're not Fridays. I think. I did it a few minutes ago.
Thank you. I did not check that.
So basically, what we would be approving is the third Friday of every month in 2019, except for June, where we would not have a meeting, and December, which would be the second Friday of the month. So I will entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So September will be the 20th. November will be the
15th or the 22nd.
the third Friday.
Okay.
And
All right.
that's good, because then we're moving December up, that gives us
Yeah.
4 weeks between.
All right, it brings us to general public comment. I have no speaker cards at the moment. Come right on up.
Come on, George. You always have something to say. Absolutely.
My name is George Rosenfield. I'm an environmental scientist, retired. I think I'm the only one in the room ever here that was here in the 1950s and 60s. And Cocoa was the saltwater trout capital of the world, among other things. And when you cross the causeway or a bridge, you can see the bottom of the Indian River Lagoon. But I want to congratulate the panel. And I want to, excuse me, I think that what's being done today is is working very nicely. I think it's the greatest thing. You even have the county commission convinced, and we're getting support out of the county commission now, which we weren't getting just a few months ago. And I congratulate the whole panel, because don't impress often, but I'm impressed with the work that's being done. And I just want to say thank you, and I think you're doing a good job.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. Final comments?
I have two items. One, it's always laudable when a citizen stands for public office, and Lorraine Cost did. And if you don't know, she is a new member of the City Council in Cocoa. Well done.
Thank you.
And the second thing, last meeting I raised the concept of creating inside county staff a Lagoon Coordination Working Group to see that all the various piece parts of the county staff know what each other are doing. And I said I would produce a paragraph. It turns out to be 2 paragraphs for Virginia to look at and have, and give her an opportunity to staff it inside staff. I have done so, and we've had some dialogue on it. I would envision that this becomes part of the project plan that we're working on, and it would, if it was incorporated there and approved by the county commission, would direct the county manager to form Indian River Lagoon Coordination Working Group to tie together the various parts of the county staff and give him the authority and ability to figure out what this critter is and how often it meets and who it reports to and so on. Obviously, this coordination goes on right now. But at some point, and obviously the leader of it is Virginia Barker, head of Natural Resources. At some point and on occasion, it can happen that this member of county staff talks to that member of county staff, and the response is, I don't work for you. And I think the way you get around that is say, yeah, you all do work for the county manager. I had the opportunity, I won't speak for him, but I had the opportunity to chat last night at a social gathering with the county manager, raise this topic to him. I won't speak for what his opinion will be on this, but I don't think we're swimming upstream from the reaction I got. And I also think that it's our autonomous duty to deal with things like this rather than just do exactly what the county staff tells us. So that's the status of that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't know if I'll be reappointed to the Oversight Committee, but I do want to say that in my new role, one of the pillars of my platform was being a leader in terms of restoring the lagoon. And we are going to promote stewardship, leverage partnerships, and we are going to show leadership in the city of Cocoa. And we're going to compete with Satellite Beach for that status. And part of the way we'll do that is through our Sustainability Advisory Committee, and we have Robert here who's a part of that as well. So this is a real team effort.
All right. Any further comments? Yes.
I needed a little bit of clarity about John's discussions with the county manager and with Virginia on this working group. Was this a motion we passed last time?
No.
Okay, so at some point in time...
We'll see it.
Okay.
Yeah. We haven't seen anything in next year's plan yet.
So over the last 2 years, occasionally there are items that are brought up and sort of thrown in Virginia's way that you do that is what's being said. And sometimes I don't feel like she should be following anything other than motions from us. And so I just wanted to make that point.
No, I don't disagree.
I don't think the concept is ripe at this point to provide a motion. I do think it's worthy of exploration. It definitely will come back to us.
Yes, Courtney.
I just wanted to give some kudos to the staff for addressing some of the issues on social media that I've seen. And Brandon, you did a great job in responding to a muck dredging question that a resident posted. And there's like probably about 12 Facebook pages dedicated to the lagoon, and your staff's on a lot of them, and I see them responding to that, to a lot of questions, and I think you guys are doing a great job in dispelling some of the rumors and answering a lot of the questions out there, and I just wanted to say great job.
Thank you. All right. Well, have a blessed and prosperous Thanksgiving. Meeting adjourned.
Yes, the weather is
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.